What is up, guys? It's me here with another tech video for you all. And today we are gonna be talking about something called a networking device. Well, it's exactly as it sounds. It's a device that allows multiple other devices to communicate with each other. Now there are many different types of networking devices. In this video, we are going to be focusing on the switch. Basically, you give it a layer 3 switch and it will route stuff for you. But this particular switch, like I said, is a layer 2 switch, so it can't do any routing whatsoever. Port security is basically a way of restricting who or what can plug into this switch. I understand how this switch works, but how does it compare to other switches? Well, that's a great question, and the answer is simple. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button below. I really appreciate it. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would love to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And if you want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is this one right here, where I talk about subnetting. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video. There are 3 main types of switches: access switches, which are the ones that you typically find in homes and small businesses; aggregation switches, which are the ones that you find in larger businesses; and core switches, which are the ones that you find in large data centers. So this particular switch is an access switch. It's just a small little switch that you find in homes and small businesses. They're usually not very expensive, and they are typically unmanaged switches. That means you can't go in and configure them. You can't change the settings. It's just a dumb switch. For example, if I wanted to make sure that only one person could plug into this switch at a time, I could do that. Or if I wanted to make sure that certain types of devices couldn't plug into this switch, I could do that as well. For example, if I was running a business and I didn't want people to plug in their iPhones to the network, I could do that. I could restrict it so that only certain devices could plug into it. And that's just another thing that this switch can do that makes it really powerful. However, there are actually some things that this switch can do that make it really cool. For example, let's say I had 40 computers here in this classroom and I wanted them all to be able to communicate with each other. The aggregation switch is a little bit more powerful. You can manage it. You can go in there and configure things. And that's where you want to be for most small businesses. Most small businesses won't need anything more than an aggregation switch. However, if you're a huge company like Google or Facebook, you'll need something more powerful than that. And that's where the core switch comes in. The core switch is the most powerful type of switch. These are the ones that you find in large data centers. They are super fast. They are very expensive, and you definitely don't need one unless you're a huge company. I can buy 40 cables. And I can actually take these computers and plug them all directly into this switch, and they will all be able to communicate with each other. However, this switch only has 10 ports. So what do I do if I need more than 10? Well, the answer is simple. I buy a bigger switch. It's really that easy. But there's more to it than that. Because this is a layer 2 switch, it basically does something called MAC address learning. That means whenever a device tries to communicate with another device on the network, it learns where that device is. So if I plug a bunch of computers in here, it will learn where each one of those computers are, and it will basically build a table of where all these devices are located. So if I want to send a message from one computer to another computer, it knows exactly where to send it without having to go and ask any other devices. That's why it's called a layer 2 switch, because it operates at the data link layer. The switch is one of the most important devices in any kind of data network. Well, it's good, but it's not perfect. One of the problems with this particular switch is that if one of these cables were to break, the switch wouldn't know about it. It would still think that device was on the network even though it's not. So what can we do to fix that? Well, the answer is simple. We use something called spanning tree. Spanning tree is basically a way of making sure that if one of these cables were to break, the switch would detect it and it would stop sending messages down that cable. Essentially, it creates a loop-free network. And this is very important, because if you had a loop in your network, you would get a lot of weird stuff happening. You would get messages going around and around and around in a loop, and nobody would ever get the message they were looking for. So spanning tree fixes that problem. And again, this is something that this particular switch can do because it's a layer 2 switch. It's actually used in your home network every single day, but you probably don't even realize it. I'm gonna go ahead and show you a couple examples here. Now, what is a networking device? The first thing I want to talk about is this little guy right here. This is a $1,800 Cisco switch. It's just sitting there. It's in a rack, it's being cooled by that big fan over there. But if I reach over here and grab this little cable tester, which is literally all I did was go on Amazon and type in cable tester, found this bad boy, super cheap. Let's see if we can plug into this port right here, and there we go. Solid white light. Okay, so this is a straight through cable. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I can actually take my laptop and plug it into this port right here, and now I'm connected to the network. I can ping 192.168.1.1. That's usually the default gateway on most home networks. Let's try a different port. We'll try this one. We'll plug it in, and there we go. Same thing. We get a solid white light, and now I can come over here to this port and I can plug my computer directly into this $1,800 Cisco switch. So these switches are pretty much everywhere. And at this point you might be saying, all right Kevin, great. Your job is done. You told me what it is, you showed me what it looks like. What else is there to know about this thing? Well, quite a bit actually, because when you start to dig into it, it gets really interesting. First off, this particular switch is a managed switch. That means I, as the administrator, have access to its configuration. I can log into it and change things. However, there are also unmanaged switches out there which are cheaper, and they do not allow you to access their configuration. So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that this particular switch is a layer 2 switch, meaning it operates at the data link layer of the OSI model. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but essentially what that means is that it can do some pretty basic stuff. It can send and receive Ethernet frames. It can do MAC address filtering, spanning tree, things of that nature. Again, not getting too deep into it. There are also layer 3 switches out there which can do more advanced stuff like routing. So this is great, right? Another thing that this switch can do is something called port security. But at this point, you might be saying, okay, great. However, as your network gets bigger, you'll need to upgrade to a bigger switch. And that's where the aggregation switch comes in. So hopefully now you understand a little bit more about switches and how they work.